Hello. Greetings to everyone. Welcome back to the late-night storytelling channel of Destroyer of Souls. As usual, today Destroyer of Souls will present to our audience some true spiritual stories from uncles, aunts, brothers, sisters, friends, and younger ones sent to Destroyer of Souls from all over. The character in this episode is a very long story, which will span from this episode to the next one. The character's name is Victor, and let me briefly introduce him. He works in the spiritual realm. However, it is merely a side job for him, and he does not engage in business or earn money from this work. It's like a calling for him. Whenever he meets someone, if the conditions are right, as if it has been arranged by higher powers, he will try to help that person to the best of his ability without taking any money in return. If there is no connection, then he simply won't help. This is similar to many of the teachers and spiritual practitioners that Destroyer of Souls has shared on the channel before. Before diving into this content, Destroyer of Souls would like to remind that the email to receive spiritual stories is displayed on the screen, njufeng@fenghuanghedia.com. We sincerely hope to receive true spiritual stories from our audience. You can send them to that email. Without wasting your time any further, let us go into the content of today's video. As Destroyer of Souls briefly summarized about Victor, his main job now is event organizing. During that time, Victor went to Saigon to attend the wedding of a colleague's younger sister, and a spiritual incident occurred. On that day, most of Victor's colleagues already knew about his special ability, but Victor had instructed a few people who knew to keep it quiet because he didn't want any spiritual or mysterious matters to spread in the workplace. However, it's not easy to keep it hidden forever, as upon returning to Hanoi, the story reached a boss named Gabriel. Gabriel is a businessman, and in Vietnam, business people tend to be quite superstitious. The relationship between Gabriel and Victor is quite close. Besides work, they are also members of a charity group in Hanoi, where they distribute free porridge every Sunday at 2 locations, a hospital and a children's shelter. Victor really appreciates Gabriel for being gentle, honest, and kind-hearted. In general, they are very close. When Gabriel learned about the incident in Saigon, he told Victor, "Hey Victor, if that's the case, when the day of the offering comes, you should go to the market and light some incense. Sometimes in business, a little feng shui is needed for luck." Everything was going normally until the beginning of June 2023, when Victor was sitting in his office. Victor remembers that day precisely around 1 p.m. Right after finishing lunch, he took advantage of the time to work on a detailed safety report regarding electrical safety and fire prevention measures. The reason for emphasizing this part is that the work that day was extremely exhausting. The report was exceptionally detailed, so Victor's mind couldn't process information quickly anymore. At that time, Victor and his team were preparing for the Green Summer Camp project for middle school students, serving the needs of the education department. Since these students were of adolescent age, the city education department had very strict requirements. In the events department, Victor managed many aspects, but his main responsibilities were sound, lighting, and contracts. Therefore, Victor had to understand everything related to electrical wires, how the wiring was laid out, and the process of preparing the report was incredibly headache-inducing. At that time, Victor was sitting there working his head off when suddenly Gabriel called him. Picking up the phone, he heard Gabriel's voice on the other end, sounding very panicked. He exclaimed, "Victor, Victor, come out here and help me a little, please." Hearing his tone and demeanor, Victor could tell something was not right, and something serious was definitely going on. Besides Gabriel's evidently flustered voice, Victor could also hear many people shouting and chaos surrounding him. Faintly, Victor caught a few phrases like, "Someone has gone down. Have they been found yet? Did they jump in? Over there, over there." Victor was sure that something major was happening, feeling anxious, so he asked Gabriel, "Calm down, brother. What happened? Tell me." At this point, he began to explain that his son, along with a cousin, had gone to play by the pond behind the village and had slipped and fallen in. It had been over an hour already, and they still had not been recovered. Without a doubt, upon hearing this, Victor was immediately alarmed because his son Gabriel's little boy, Liam, was only 7 years old. Victor wasn't very clear about his nephew. He quickly said to Gabriel, "Where are you now? Send me your location. I'll come right away." Leaving all his ongoing work behind, Victor rushed down to the company reception to borrow a motorcycle key for speed, because usually Victor drove a car. However, from the company to Gabriel's place, which is called a village, but is actually a bit far from the city, traveling by motorcycle would be much faster. Otherwise, coming by car would undoubtedly lead to traffic jams and road congestion. At that time, work was very demanding, so even though Victor had asked Gabriel to send his location, his mind automatically presumed that this incident was happening right at Gabriel's house. Victor quickly hopped on his motorbike and raced straight home to gather all the necessary tools for the ritual. He lit incense on the altar to present before the deity, much like a saint he revered. Once the incense was lit, Victor continued riding directly to Gabriel's house. However, on the way there, he was headed in the opposite direction, since Victor's house and Gabriel's house were on opposite sides. The red lights kept appearing along the route, making Victor increasingly restless and confused. He clearly remembered it was around 2 p.m. when he stopped at the intersection leading straight to Gabriel's house. The new model scooter had an idling stop feature, meaning that when it stopped, the engine would automatically turn off, and all he needed to do was give it a gentle throttle to continue. But when he reached that intersection, the scooter was off, waiting for the red light. When the light turned green, Victor twisted the throttle, but the scooter refused to move. Needless to say, when you're in a hurry and the car suddenly breaks down, it's incredibly frustrating. The car just won't start, no matter what he does. So Victor decides to take it to a parking garage near that intersection to leave it there. However, upon reaching the first garage, the security guard adamantly refuses to accept the car because it won't start. Victor tries to explain the situation, but there are several reasons for the guard's refusal. First, he's concerned that the car might not be of known origin. Second, he's worried that the owner might cause trouble. And third, he fears that if the car is indeed broken and there's a leak of fuel in the garage, it could pose a fire hazard. Victor reluctantly decides to push the car to another garage, but this time it's a residential parking garage, not a commercial one. They only accept vehicles if a resident calls down to notify them in advance. At this point, there was no other choice. He could only take the car for repair. But Victor thought that with everything being so urgent, he didn't know how long it would take to get it fixed. Victor immediately called Gabriel and said, "Wait for me a bit. I'm on my way to your house, but the company car broke down. It's dead now. I need to find a place to leave it temporarily, and then I'll book a ride over. I can pick up the car later this afternoon." Upon hearing this, Gabriel reacted immediately. "Oh my goodness. Victor, why are you coming to my place? I'm at my grandparents' house right now. The kids are playing over here. I sent you the location on Facebook. I thought you had seen it already." Hearing that, Victor shuddered, quickly opened his phone, and indeed saw that Gabriel had sent the location on Facebook, but he had forgotten to check it. The location was at the intersection he passed earlier. Instead of going straight to Gabriel's house, he needed to turn left to reach the exact spot he had been sent on the map. At that moment, Victor understood what was happening, so he called Gabriel and said, "Wait for me for a little while. I'll be there in 10 minutes." Just as he said that, he turned the key and the car started running normally, as if it had never broken down. Upon arriving, Gabriel welcomed Victor inside, and Victor saw the smoke from incense rising heavily around the lake. Local people, neighbors, and even the police were present to assist. Victor told Gabriel, "You just wait here for a moment." Then, Victor found a secluded spot and performed a ritual to inquire with the Earth God. After the ritual, Victor called Gabriel over and asked, "You told me that Liam and another kid were playing here and drowned, but how come there's still another kid in the lake? You managed to save Liam, right?" Hearing this, Gabriel's face turned pale, and he replied, "How did you know there was another kid in the lake?" "When I called, I only said there were 2 kids. It's true that someone managed to pull Liam out in time, but when they fell in, both of them were together." Gabriel continued, saying the other boy's name was Mason, who was older than Liam and could swim. When someone on the shore heard their cries for help, they jumped in to rescue them. Seeing that Mason could swim and the distance between the 2 boys was quite far, that person decided to save Liam first. After getting Liam safely to the shore, when they turned back to look for Mason, the surface of the lake was calm, and Mason was nowhere to be seen. Hearing this part, Victor then said to Gabriel, "I just performed the opening ceremony with the local deity here. I'm telling you this. Please don't be upset, but the one who was supposed to die is Liam, your son. Someone has called him out here to take him away." Hearing Victor say that his child should have been the one to die, Gabriel could hardly stand, his legs trembling. He stammered, asking, "Is the river ghost taking my child?" Victor simply replied, "Not a river ghost. What it is, I don't know exactly yet." After that, Victor took out a stick from his tools that looked like a magic wand, but in reality, it was just an ordinary piece of wood. He drew a circle on the ground and told Gabriel, "Stand in this circle with me." In an email, Victor explained to the destroyer of souls that the reason he said it wasn't a river ghost was because a river ghost only pulls people down into the water, while this spirit could come ashore, even entering Liam's room to lure him out to the pond in order to capture his soul. This was definitely not a river ghost. Once they were both standing in the circle, Victor told Gabriel, "Your child is lucky to have escaped this fate. Let me tell you, this pond is filled with resentment. Spiritually speaking, this pond does not have a water god like land has its guardian spirits, or rivers have their river guardians, the deities that govern those areas. But beneath this pond lies a demon that reigns under there." After hearing this, Gabriel's face turned pale. He asked if there was any way out and if his child was safe now. Victor shook his head, saying, "Not yet. You need to listen to me." Then Victor took off the silver necklace around his neck, handed it to Gabriel, and instructed, "You take this and run quickly to Liam. Put it on him." Victor explained earlier that demon tried to grab your child, but it failed. Luckily, Liam had someone compatible jump down to save him. And that person is not ordinary at all. Saving someone from the clutches of a demon is already difficult, let alone snatching the prey right from the demon's hands. That person must be exceptional. The demon hasn't been able to catch Liam yet, so it hasn't released the child lying at the bottom of the lake. Fortunately for you, there has been a lot of incense and offerings around the lake lately, and since this demon hasn't been worshipped for a long time, it has not rushed to find your child yet. Now you must quickly go and put this silver necklace around Liam's neck, then send me a message to report back. I have to stay here to keep watch. If I leave and something goes wrong, I won't be able to save your child." After listening to that, Gabriel hurriedly took the silver necklace that Victor had given him and ran off immediately. To help everyone understand the seriousness of the situation better, Victor explained a little more. Firstly, why did Victor have to use the ritual tool to draw a circle and stand with Gabriel inside it? Because the two of them were standing too close to the demon and were afraid it would hear them, so they had to draw the circle as a barrier for protection. Secondly, what is this silver necklace, and why does it have such strong protective power? Victor had once encountered a sorcerer in the mountainous region, but when he arrived, the sorcerer had already passed away. However, he had an adopted son who had inherited the craft from him and later gifted Victor the silver necklace. When he arrived at the site, Victor intended to perform a spell to send forth an undead spirit to find the owner of the necklace, namely the sorcerer's adopted son from the mountain, as he felt that this matter was beyond his capabilities. As he stepped forward, Victor immediately felt the thick resentment and sinister energy, knowing that his own spiritual strength was still weak, and that he could not confront this situation on his own. Regarding this, the adopted brother on the mountain didn't have a mobile phone to communicate regularly, even though Victor had given him his number. Occasionally, when he came down to town for something, he would call Victor. Therefore, the quickest way to reach him was to send a spirit to find the previous owner of the necklace. However, at that time, Victor sent the spirit, but it didn't carry out the task. Victor was puzzled as to why this happened. After a while of contemplation, Victor realized that after his adopted brother consecrated and marked the necklace, he had also performed the ceremony of severing ties and changing ownership. This meant that after the ownership change ceremony, the necklace now belonged to Victor, and he had no further connection to it. As a result, the spirit could not find the previous owner of the necklace, because they recognized that the current owner was none other than Victor. After Gabriel had run away for a while, Victor stayed at the scene, carefully observing his surroundings. Once again, Victor found a hidden spot to light incense and call upon the deity. As the destroyer of souls once said, the deity is the advisor of the officials, and the deity also confirmed that there were demons lurking in this place. However, the situation was precarious, and he didn't know how to handle it. At that moment, Victor received a message from Gabriel reporting that his son had awakened, but his eyes were red and irritated from water getting in them. Gabriel planned to take the boy to the hospital for a checkup. However, the boy was exhibiting unusual behavior, sitting by the window and laughing to himself. He even wanted to take off a necklace because he felt it was tight and uncomfortable. Finding it odd, Gabriel immediately texted Victor. As soon as he received the message, Victor quickly realized the urgency of the situation. Since coming here, Victor had never seen Liam, nor had he seen any ghost or demon rising from the lake. The symptoms exhibited by Liam suggested that he might be possessed by a demon. The only explanation was that when Liam was brought ashore, while he was still unconscious, the demon had managed to enter his body. Fortunately, Victor had already masoned before, giving the necklace to Gabriel to put on Liam. Otherwise, it would be hard to know what might happen. Victor also suspected that the demon Upon entering Liam's body, wanted to cause trouble, but couldn't. It couldn't kill him, couldn't expel itself, and couldn't escape either. But the bigger issue was that from the moment Victor connected with the Earth Spirit and summoned the deity, both confirmed that there was still another demon under the lake, meaning there were actually two demons present here, not just one. Immediately, upon understanding the situation, Victor took out his phone and called Gabriel, instructing him, "I'm working on a solution. Absolutely do not remove that necklace. If you take it off, the other demon will take revenge and it will kill your whole family. Don't underestimate this situation." After finishing up, Victor was about to put his phone away when it suddenly rang. Looking at the screen, he saw an unknown number. Due to his job in event planning, Victor had a habit of answering unknown numbers, so he picked up and asked, "Who is this?" Unexpectedly, the voice on the other end was very familiar. It was his foster brother from the mountain. He spoke in a hurried, worried tone. "Where are you? Is something wrong? Why aren't you wearing the necklace I gave you?" The copper tray with your talisman suddenly fell off the altar. "I know something is amiss. I checked the oracle, and it shows that the person in danger isn't you, but the one wearing that necklace. Speak up. Don't hide it. The necklace has brought an omen down to my altar. It's definitely not something simple. I saw this and had to run down to the town to borrow a phone to call you." This passage explains a bit more. In the past, when the adopted son gave Victor a necklace, he performed some spells, keeping a small piece as a marker. If there was any danger related to the necklace, or if the necklace couldn't provide protection, the spell would report back to his altar, so he would know immediately if something was happening. Therefore, when he was sitting at home, the necklace on the altar, which was closely linked to the necklace, suddenly had a problem. He understood right away that something big was going on, so he called Victor. Hearing his voice, Victor was indescribably happy, even more than finding gold. Victor then recounted earlier, "I used the necklace to summon the spirit to find you, but since you had performed a ceremony to change ownership, the spirit received the order but could not go. Mason informed me that this matter is very urgent." The adopted son explained, "I have performed a spell to cut the connection, so the spell on that necklace still belongs to me. If you want to find me, you need to set up an altar to search for the spell, not just look for the object as usual. If anything is happening, speak quickly. Finding me is not important. Just hurry up." Immediately, Victor summarized everything he had just witnessed and the information he had gathered for his adoptive brother. After listening, he became angry and instructed, "Now do as I say. You go to the lakeshore, as close as you can get, but remember to chant carefully. Be careful it doesn't pull you down. Go to the end of the lake. Choose the direction the wind is blowing, then be silent. Don't ask anything. When I'm done, I'll tell you. Hurry up." Holding the phone, Victor quietly murmured, as if reading a protection chant, similar to when encountering a ghost. By the time he reached the end of the lake, Victor reported, "What now?" "I've arrived at the right spot." At this moment, his adoptive brother replied, "All right, now listen to my question. Isn't the surface of the lake very still right now?" Victor replied, "That's right, brother. The surface of the lake looks very calm, but it's just the surface. Earlier, I called upon the deity, and the deity told me that beneath the lake, it is both deep and swirling." Hearing that, the adopted brother continued, "Beneath it, there is not just one demon as you think, but two more. I reiterate, There are a total of 3 demons in this lake, not just 2, he further advised. Now I'll instruct you on how to retrieve the body of the child first. You must personally go down to fetch it. You need to prepare a black dog. Take a little blood from the black dog, remember. It must be black dog blood. After that, gather ashes from the incense burners that people just lit around the lake and mix them with the dog blood. You also need to find a dirty pair of pants belonging to the living child. Pour the mixture of blood and ashes on it, making it dirty. Then, paddle the boat out to the middle of the lake and toss the pants into the sky. When the pants fall onto the water, they will float and then sink. Change from where the pants fell to where they sink. If you search carefully, you will find the body of the child lying underneath. When preparing to retrieve the body, the adopted brother reminded him to pay attention to the time and that all ritual procedures must be performed according to the living child's date of birth, not that of the deceased. Only by doing it this way could the living child escape misfortune, and the soul of the lost child would not be trapped beneath the lake. Upon hearing this, Victor immediately complied. Before hanging up, he added, "Now you must retrieve the body first, and only then deal with the demon inside the living boy. Slow and steady wins the race. Everything must be done as I instructed. Your body is still weak, so don't be reckless. As for the 2 demons below, leave that to me. If I don't make it, I will come to your house tonight." Hearing what his foster brother said, Victor also breathed a sigh of relief. Victor shared that his journey into spirituality came by fate, though he didn't necessarily want to follow this path. He felt he had to go along with the destiny that had been laid out for him. Victor was open and candid, stating that he would do whatever he could. And if there was something he couldn't do, he would try his best within his capabilities to find a way to help. At this moment, Victor reached out through his connections to find a black dog and obtain its blood, preparing everything as instructed by his foster brother. When he was ready, Victor brought all his supplies to the location. Since this lake was not a man-made one or a tourist attraction, there were no boats available to paddle out into the middle of the lake. Victor had no choice but to construct a makeshift raft by tying banana tree trunks together to sit and paddle on. He placed the dirty pants of the child in the center of the raft, chanting spells to protect himself as he paddled. Just as his foster brother had predicted, when he got closer to the middle of the lake, Victor felt 2 hands gripping firmly at his legs, pulling him down strongly. Because the raft was small, Victor had to let his legs dangle into the water. The sensation of 2 hands gripping tightly, pulling continuously, was overwhelming. Despite still reciting his protective incantations, the raft swayed violently, and eventually, Victor fell backward, plunging into the water. Fortunately, the child's pants remained on the raft since Victor had fallen backward. Victor struggled to keep himself afloat in the middle of the lake, even though he still had not reached the exact position that his foster brother had instructed specifically. He needed to get right to the center of the lake. At that moment, Victor struggled beneath the surface, paddling, kicking, and stretching continuously, but no one on the shore dared to jump in to help because they were certain something supernatural was happening. In the critical moment, Victor felt a bony hand touch his hair, gripping tightly at the back of his neck and yanking hard as if someone was pulling a cluster of hair down. Victor's body was covered in goosebumps. When he turned around, he saw an old man, tall and thin, with a bony frame, but with a surprisingly strong pull, helping Victor cling to a makeshift raft. He didn't know where the old man had come from. He only heard him say, "Get on." Thanks to that, Victor managed to climb onto the raft, and the old man held the raft firmly underwater. When Victor was sitting securely on the raft, the old man pushed the raft to a position in the middle of the lake, just a few meters away, to bring Victor to the exact spot he needed to be. Seizing the opportunity, Victor took Liam's dirty pants and threw them into the sky, just as his foster brother had instructed. The pants barely touched the water, drifted a few meters, and then sank immediately. Before he could react, Victor turned to look at the old man beside him, who said, "Stay here. I'll go down first." He said only that much, then took a deep breath and dove below to retrieve the body. Victor was sure that's what he was doing. Still shaken, Victor sat on the raft and looked around. About a minute later, the old man surfaced with a rope tied around his waist. While swimming back to shore, he said, "Row in. I see the body now." Just as he stepped ashore, the first thing Victor did was check the time on his phone. Then he pushed his way through the crowd to see the body. As soon as he caught sight of the corpse, Victor felt a chill run down his spine because it was exactly 8:13. He remembered it clearly because this body had been submerged for over 8 hours, yet what lay before him was hard to believe. The corpse was bloated, mouth wide open, tongue sticking out, one eye glaring white, while the other appeared to have been pecked by fish until it nearly fell out of its socket. Victor saw, with his own eyes, the child laying motionless, with only one eye remaining, skin purple and mottled, scalp peeling, and fingernails and toenails stuck together with the flesh behind the neck. The hair had also fallen out, clinging to bits of flesh, forming grotesque patches that swayed unsettlingly. Victor was certain that this was not the work of fish, for according to the locals, this lake had very few fish, and the fish that were here were quite timid, rarely caught by anyone. But looking at the condition of the body, it was hard for anyone to believe that it had only been underwater for a little over 8 hours. Typically, a condition like that of the corpse should take at least 3-4 days, or even longer. At that moment, looking at the body, Victor also felt a chill from the sheer horror. Victor recounted that the father of the child, named Ty, who was a sibling of Gabriel, had cradled his son's body. As he held him, blood and fluid from the nose and mouth of the corpse gushed out, creating a scene that was both terrifying and heart-wrenching. Victor further explained that normally, those who die by drowning, by rivers or streams, or by hanging, have special rituals to prevent their spirits from following their family members. People who die by drowning or by hanging are usually not allowed to have their relatives come close. In the case of hangings, when the body is brought down, a knife must be used to cut the rope, and then the rope is burned to prevent others from using it again, as a precaution against misfortune. For those who have drifted away or drowned, if relatives approach and the spirit of the deceased still harbors grievances, unable to express anything before passing, they often cough up blood and the phlegm that has accumulated in their throat and nose spilling out as a sign to inform their loved ones. After completing the necessary procedures, the authorities confirmed that the child's body exhibited many unusual signs, so they had to conduct an autopsy. If everything is normal, they would return the body to the family within 24 hours for the funeral. Victor was well aware of the situation, so he advised everyone to avoid certain taboos. Once everything was settled, Victor called Gabriel to report on the situation and reminded him that the supernatural matters were not yet over. Victor instructed Gabriel to assign someone to keep watch by the lake, ensuring the incense did not burn out, and to guard the black dog that Victor had tied to the tree. If the black dog were to escape or the incense were to extinguish, the two vengeful spirits from the lake would rise and cause chaos, which could endanger Liam. This black dog was the guardian, preventing the two spirits from surfacing. It was essential for someone to keep a constant watch until the sorcerer arrived in the city. Victor continued to wait, and after a while, he saw his younger brother and a social acquaintance, Gabriel, arrive. Victor handed everything over and carefully instructed them before returning home to bathe and cleanse his body. Once he finished, Victor approached the altar to consult the oracle. However, he asked 3 times, but no oracle appeared, which was a sign of an ominous omen. At that moment, Victor received a call from an unknown number, and on the other end was his adoptive father, using someone else's phone to call. The father said, "I can't come to your place right now. I have something more important to deal with." When Victor asked for the reason, he did not say anything, only promised to explain when they met, and then hung up. Victor understood that something very urgent must have come up for his father to act this way, seeing it as a sign from the heavens with no other choice. All Victor could do was light incense on the altar of the deity, praying for peace in all matters. Now, he just had to wait to see when the authorities would return the body of the boy, Mason, so they could perform the memorial ceremony. After lighting the incense and finishing his prayers, Victor rode his motorcycle to the company to switch for the car. Once he got the vehicle, Victor decided to call Gabriel, who said he was at home. Victor immediately drove to his house to see how the boy was doing. Arriving at the front door, Victor did not enter right away, but listened to the voices coming from inside. Gabriel's voice saying, "All right, go to sleep now. You've been tired all day, and your mom is tired too. Just go to sleep early, and whatever you want, I'll buy for you tomorrow." Victor stood at the corner of the door, observing that Gabriel seemed unaware of his presence, continuing to say, "Just go to sleep." The important thing was that, right in front of him, there was no one on the sofa. Victor immediately understood that the demon was trying to lure Gabriel into removing the necklace. Victor intended to step inside, but hesitated, as the demon within Liam was being restrained by the enchanted necklace and could not escape. If it got out, it would harm the entire household. It didn't need to engage in such tricks. Victor was only worried about Gabriel's 2 younger siblings who were keeping watch at the lakeside. At that moment, Victor called out, "Gabriel, come out here. I've arrived. Let's bring some late-night snacks to the siblings by the lakeside." Victor was still standing outside the door, about 10 steps away from where Gabriel was sitting. But it seemed that he didn't hear Victor calling. He continued looking straight ahead and said, "All right, kid, go to sleep. I'll be in soon." About 10 seconds later, suddenly Gabriel shuddered, then turned towards the big door and saw Victor standing there, looking dazed, and said, "Oh, Victor, when did you get here? Come inside. Why are you standing there?" "My Liam is fine now. He was just here and just ran into his room." Seeing Gabriel's eyes slightly glazed over, as if he were in a daze, Victor realized that he seemed to be a bit out of it, which explained his reaction. Victor gently replied, "Yes, if the kid is already asleep, then that's good, no problem. Now, let's take the food to the lakeshore for the guys out there lest they get hungry. That would be a pity." Gabriel did not react at all. He just kept nodding and saying, "Yeah." After that, he turned to remind his wife at home to watch the kids, then stepped outside and got into Victor's car. When the car drove past an intersection, Victor pretended to say, "Hey, could you lean down and open the compartment next to the passenger seat? I left a report there this morning. Could you check it for me?" Gabriel followed exactly what Victor said, as if he would do whatever he was told. While he bent down, Victor muttered an incantation and lightly tapped his head twice. At that moment, Gabriel jolted, as if he had just woken up, and turned to ask in confusion, Why am I sitting here? I remember I was at home, talking to Liam just now. At that moment, Victor said to Gabriel, You're lucky, Gabriel. It's the blessing of 3 lifetimes for your family. If I hadn't arrived in time, you'd have been taken away, your soul and spirit gone. Now get out of the car. Gabriel's face showed a hint of confusion. He didn't understand what was happening, but sensed something was amiss. He suddenly realized he was sitting in a car, and everything that had happened before was just a hazy memory. He immediately got out of the car, and Victor burned a talisman, grounding his soul and spirit. After a while, once he was fully alert, Gabriel shuddered and said, Oh no, Victor. I just remembered. The one I was talking to earlier wasn't my son, Liam. Its face was distorted and deformed, but I didn't pay attention. When you came into the house, I knew you were standing outside but couldn't call or say anything. I just kept staring at it. It was only when you jolted me back to reality that I could talk to you. Now that you've finished the spell, I can clearly recall exactly what just happened to share with you, Victor. At that moment, Victor briefly explained to Gabriel that he had just been affected by some sort of force, but for now, they should just set it aside. The boy was still wearing a magical necklace, so he was under control, and it should be fine. Their current task was to head to the lakeside to see if Gabriel's 2 younger siblings had accidentally extinguished the incense or let the black dog loose somewhere else. While driving to the lakeside, Victor and Gabriel tried calling the 2 of them. Both of them grew anxious, and Victor pressed the accelerator harder, making several more calls. When the phone finally started ringing, no one picked up. After more than 10 seconds of the call, there was still no response on the other end. Knowing for sure that something was amiss, they sped off as fast as they could toward the lakeside. When they arrived, fortunately, the 2 people had not been harmed. They were still sitting by the fire, smoking, and doing some trivial tasks. The 2 were sitting far apart. One was asleep, while the other sat smoking and scrolling through his phone. At that moment, Gabriel lost his temper, ran over and shouted, Why have I been trying to call you this whole time with no answer? It kept going to voicemail, and when it finally rang, you didn't pick up. And when you finally did, why didn't you say anything? The 2 looked confused and asked, What are you talking about? Are you sure you're not mistaken? No one has called in a while. I've been playing a game this whole time. You asked us to keep watch at night, so we were preparing supplies, charging power banks, and had plenty of food, planning to sleep here. There's no way the phone ran out of battery. Check your phone and see if there are any missed calls. After saying that, the other person turned to the one beside them who was keeping watch. Since the last time we lit incense here, it's just been me and it. When it lit the incense, I took the dog to the nearby tree for it to relieve itself, afraid it would mess up right where the incense was offered, making it dirty. Then we both came back to take turns. One person sleeps while the other keeps watch. You, said someone answered the phone, but it was sleeping like a log. I was sitting right next to it when its phone rang. I knew. So what are you talking about that's so strange? At that point, Gabriel picked up the phones of the 2 and checked. The battery was still full. But when checking the call history, there were indeed no missed calls from his phone. He felt goosebumps. Then Victor asked the 2 people keeping watch over the incense, Has the incense gone out at all? One of them replied, It's about to go out. Luckily, it just burned down to the tip before it went out, just in time to add another stick because that one was done. It's also because everyone used 3 or 4 different types of incense. The burning times are all different. How can we keep watch properly? When the body was retrieved, everyone took turns buying incense, each person bringing back sticks of different lengths, making it difficult to track the burning time. Hearing the 2 people recounting the story, Victor sat back and contemplated 2 possibilities. Firstly, if the incense had just burned out when they inserted a new stick, there was a chance that the spirit trapped under the lake had escaped. Secondly, if it were true, as they told, that the new stick was placed just after the old one had extinguished, it was likely that the demon was still imprisoned beneath the lake. However, this was merely speculation. Victor wasn't sure if the 2 people were timing it accurately, which left him quite anxious. If, indeed, 2 demons had escaped from under the lake, Victor knew he was not strong enough to deal with them, as he didn't consider himself particularly skilled. Meanwhile, the only person he could rely on, his guardian spirit, was unreachable. The situation started to get tense. Victor thought to himself, "Oh no, what should I do next?" Suddenly, he remembered a relative of his who had an aunt. When Victor's father passed away, that aunt, who was a high-ranking spirit medium, was performing a ritual when a 1-meter-long incense stick suddenly broke in 2, leading her to know for sure that Victor's father had died. She was very skilled and practiced the mother worship religion. Her shrine even had a large altar dedicated to the tiger. Without delay, Victor called his aunt. As soon as the phone rang once, she picked up as if she had been waiting. She said, "Why are you only calling me now? Ever since you were born, I have known the exact year, month, day, and hour of your birth. There's no need for divination. As soon as you call, I know right away that something is wrong, don't I?" Victor told the whole story to the aunt, and she said, "Now, the owner should personally come here to take the aunt home. I will handle this matter." Immediately, the 2 brothers rode their motorcycle to pick the aunt up and bring her to Gabriel's house. When they arrived, it was nearly 2 a.m. After getting out of the car, the aunt didn't enter the house right away, but stood in front of the door, looking around for about 3-4 minutes, then said, "How could it get to this point? Why wasn't it sorted out from the very beginning? Now that it has already entered the house, how are we supposed to deal with it?" At that moment, Victor recounted to her about the 3 ghostly spirits and the instructions given by the adoptive shaman. The aunt replied, "If Liam in the house already has a protective necklace, we should go back to the lake. I will perform a ritual to summon the 2 spirits from the lake. Once we resolve those 2 spirits, we will return to this house to deal with the remaining ghost. And that will be it. There's nothing to worry about." Listening to the aunt's insistence, the 3 of them once again ran back to the lake from Gabriel's house. At first, the path was smooth, but as they got closer to the lake, the aunt suddenly shouted, "Stop the car! Turn back!" She sat alone in the back seat, while Victor and Gabriel were in the front. So when they heard her commanding voice, Victor startled and slammed on the brakes, stopping the car right away. Victor didn't understand what was happening and nervously asked, "What's wrong, Aunt?" But she didn't answer, continuously insisting, "Turn back." At that moment, Victor looked in the rearview mirror to see the aunt sitting behind him and noticed her gaze directed to the right. Victor followed her gaze, and at that instant, he saw Mason the boy, who had just died that afternoon, standing by the roadside. It was the same figure, skin pale and lifeless, one eye socket intact while the other one was missing, his hand pointing in the opposite direction, as if signaling Victor to turn the car around. Victor immediately told the aunt, "Aunt, "It's Mason, the one who just died this afternoon," and quickly turned the car around. As the headlights passed over where Mason was standing, his shadow completely vanished. It was unclear whether Gabriel saw anything, but when Victor turned to him, he had fainted. Realizing that something had happened at Gabriel's house, Victor stepped on the gas and sped back. On the way, about 2-3 minutes later, Gabriel regained consciousness, and Victor, along with the aunt, continuously encouraged him to stay calm. The aunt reminded him that once they reached home, no matter what he saw or heard, he must follow her instructions and absolutely not take any action on his own. Gabriel nodded in agreement, but still trembled like a leaf, exhausted from the day's events. When he got home, Victor saw some of his neighbor Gabriel's friends standing in front of the door, looking inside. Surely something had happened in the house. It was already past 2 a.m. At this time, Victor reassured Gabriel, saying, "Whatever happens now, stay calm. It's best if you just sit still in the car while I go down and see what the situation is." Victor activated the auto parking mode to park safely. This part needs to be mentioned because Gabriel's neighborhood usually has cars parked on the street in hidden spots, free of charge. Those who come home early can find nice parking spots, while those who arrive late often have to park in awkward or bad positions manually to ensure it is secure. For experienced drivers, they know that when their minds are tense and rushed, trying to park manually can easily lead to collisions. Therefore, Victor pressed the auto park button, took his hands off the steering wheel, and did not step on the gas or brake. The car moved a bit on its own, but suddenly halted as if some invisible obstacle had affected the brake pedal or the steering wheel, causing the auto parking mode to stop. I started the car, managed to back up a bit, but then it stalled again. Every time I started and backed up a little, it would stop. At this point, I knew for sure something was wrong. So I turned to the aunt and said, "Aunt, we're being pranked." The aunt replied, "It's been like that for a while now, not just recently. Let's leave the car here." The three of us ran down and looked inside Gabriel's house. Oh my. The place was a mess, as if a storm had just swept through pots, porcelain, cups, and teapots scattered everywhere. Looking down at the floor, there were a lot of stains. But when I examined closely, they weren't human blood, nor were they fresh blood, as the color was light and patchy. Victor and his aunt stepped inside first, while Gabriel was chatting with the neighbors, explaining that his son had nearly drowned earlier in the afternoon, which left both mother and son in a state of panic. Luckily, the incident occurred at the home of Liam's grandparents, Gabriel's biological parents, rather than in their neighborhood. When Gabriel brought Liam home, he didn't go into detail with the neighbors, so they only knew the basics, asking a few questions before moving on. Gabriel stood outside as a way to reassure the neighbors, while his aunt and Victor headed straight inside. Once inside, they found a charm necklace lying on the floor right in front of the room. At that moment, Victor immediately began searching the house for anything unusual. Victor recounted that it was fortunate to have his aunt and himself a person with the sight to see spirits, because if it were an ordinary person or Gabriel who encountered this scene, they would likely have been too scared to move. Victor described that the living room was still brightly lit, but from the kitchen onward, it was completely dark, with all the lights broken. In front of the bathroom door of Gabriel's house was the area of the skylight where the washing machine was placed. Clothes were hung out to dry, and natural light came in during the day. At night, the moonlight and streetlights shone in, creating an eerie atmosphere. Before Victor stood the wife and son of Gabriel. His wife was wearing a white nightgown, her long hair flowing down, her eyes bulging as if they were two lit candles. She was holding Liam, the 7-year-old boy, as if she were cradling an infant. This scene sent shivers down Victor's spine, as the way she held him made Liam's neck bend down in a distinctly abnormal and terrifying manner. When Victor and the aunt looked at Liam's face, they saw him grinning, his eyes vacant, and then both of them simultaneously turned to look at Victor and the aunt. What was even more frightening was that there was a live fish missing its head in Liam's mouth, and his mouth was full of blood. At that moment, Victor realized that the blood stains on the floor were due to fish blood from the refrigerator. Victor understood that the evil spirit within Liam could not lure Gabriel, so it shifted its focus to the wife who cared deeply for her son but was weak-willed. The situation worsened as 2 demons from the lakeshore had appeared, invading the house to wreak havoc. At that moment, the aunt already had her tools in hand and was about to step forward when the demon within the wife's body let out a threatening voice. "Take one more step and I'll rip this guy apart. Do you believe that?" Its voice was bizarre, unclear whether it was that of a man or a woman, sending chills down Victor's spine. Victor knew very well that while you could joke around with the living, with the dead, especially with a demon, if it said it would do something, it would. Hearing this, the aunt asked, "Who are you? When did you die that you go around harming others?" The demon replied shamelessly, "Because I like it." Meanwhile, the neighbors outside had all dispersed. Gabriel locked the gate and hurried down to assess the situation. Upon seeing Gabriel, the 2 demons completely changed their demeanor. The demon within his wife fell to its knees, weeping. "Brother, they want to take both me and our child. Please save us. I can't take it anymore, brother." The boy also bowed his head, crying pitifully, crying out, "Daddy, I'm so tired. Please come carry me, Daddy." After a day filled with too many incidents, Gabriel seemed to lose all sense of clarity. In a state of exhaustion, with his vital energy diminished, he was easily susceptible to manipulation. Seeing his wife and child in tears drove him insane. He shouted, "What are you doing to my wife and child? Get away! Don't touch them!" He transformed into a completely different person, shouting while advancing towards the 2 demons. Victor and the aunt tried to restrain him, but the scene became incredibly chaotic, with people pushing forward and holding back. Fortunately, there were already magical items prepared in advance. Victor released Gabriel, lit 3 incense sticks, and ran to the family altar, inserting the incense and bowing to summon the deity to descend into the body. As the incense began to burn, the deity immediately descended, moving straight down below. Realizing that the deity had returned, the 2 demons appeared frightened and backed away. Seizing this opportunity, the aunt grabbed the collar of Gabriel's shirt and pulled him down. Then she stepped forward and began to recite prayers. The sound of the prayers echoed as the 2 demons retreated deeper into the corner, pressing themselves tightly against the wall. The demon within the body of Mason bit its own tongue in a suicide attempt, but the demon within Victor was quick to act, rushing forward and seizing its neck, followed by a loud bang. Gabriel recounted that at that moment, his mind was in a haze, but when he heard that slap, he felt as if he wanted to regain his clarity immediately. The sound of the slap was so loud that if it were a regular person who endured that blow, they might not have survived. The female demon was momentarily stunned because the deity was standing right before it. Meanwhile, the small demon within Liam's body had the intention of committing suicide. This area was where clothes were hung to dry, with 2 steel bars that could be adjusted in height using a hand crank. At that time, the 2 steel bars were positioned alternately, one high and one low. The small demon jumped from the low bar to the high one, and from there leaped towards a window higher up. The distance from that position to the ground was 3 to 4 meters, and if Liam fell head first, he would certainly sustain a fatal head injury that could lead to death. Understanding the spirit's intention, everyone felt helpless. Gabriel was in shock, unsure of what to do. Just as the small demon was about to throw himself down, the deity within Victor's body rushed to catch Liam. At the same time, the female demon was about to bite her tongue to commit suicide, when suddenly something flew up from behind the old lady and struck the female demon, causing it to fall to the ground. Upon closer inspection, it was not a magical talisman but simply rice and salt. The one who threw it was none other than the amulet master, who was the foster father, and behind him stood an old man. At this moment, without having the chance to explain or greet anyone, as the situation was still unfolding, the amulet master holding the rice and salt took the next handful and threw it straight at Liam. After that, he and the aunt firmly held the 2 mothers and children, prying their mouths open, pouring the rice and salt inside, accompanied by a liquid from a bamboo tube thrust into their mouths, forcing them to drink. Finally, both mothers and children let out a loud scream and fainted right on the spot. A little later, after helping Liam and his mother into the room to rest and tidying up the battlefield a bit, the 5 of them sat down to talk in the living room. At this moment, Gabriel had regained his composure, but both he and Victor were startled to realize that the old man who appeared behind the fostered shaman was the very person who had rescued Liam when the 2 children fell into the water. This old man was the first to save Liam, and was also the one who helped Victor find Mason's body when Victor paddled his makeshift boat out into the river. Victor recalled clearly that at that time, the old man had said, "I will dive down first," then jumped into the water and retrieved Mason's body, after which he returned home. Now, he appeared alongside the fostered shaman, leaving everyone wondering what role does he play in all of this. At that moment, he learned that this old man had previously been a practitioner of exorcism, but later became a gravekeeper and reburier. His wife worked in the funeral profession, preparing and beautifying the deceased. When he saved 2 people from the clutches of evil spirits, first Liam and then recovering Mason's body, he knew he had interfered in dangerously spiritual matters. So after retrieving the body, he returned home to prepare, knowing that when the demon broke free, it would surely come for him. The sorcerer's apprentice also explained how he knew Victor was at Gabriel's house and came with the old gravekeeper. The sorcerer recounted, "As soon as you got into trouble, I called you and immediately prepared my tools and hit the road. But on the way, I felt uneasy. So I cast a divination and saw that you were fine, but the one who saved you would face danger." This meant the old gravekeeper. Therefore, the sorcerer sent his spirit minions to follow the spiritual trace from the necklace to find the spot by the lake, knowing that the old man would face peril there. This was also the reason he called Victor to say there was something urgent to resolve in order to get to the lake to save the old gravekeeper. When the sorcerer arrived at the lake, he saw the dog, noticed that the incense was still burning, and there were people on guard, which made him certain he had found the right place. He looked down at the lake, but did not see any sign of the demon, so he was sure that the demon had left to find the old man in charge of the watch. After inquiring with the people around, the sorcerer learned the old man's whereabouts, as this afternoon he had jumped in to save people twice, so everyone in the village knew him well. Indeed, when he arrived, the old man was being tormented. After rescuing him and inquiring thoroughly, the old man recounted everything that had happened, and, knowing about the family of Liam's paternal side, specifically the biological parents of Gabriel, he sought out Gabriel's home to resolve the recent issues. According to the shaman, he had vanquished the 3 demons, completely obliterating their spirits. The 3 demons were under the lake. The small demon had possessed Liam. The mother demon had inhabited Gabriel's wife, and the father demon had sought revenge on the old caretaker. The shaman had successfully handled everything, restoring peace to the family. At this point, everyone was stunned, feeling as if life was full of strange coincidences, revolving around just a few individuals. At that moment, everyone let out a sigh of relief, thinking that everything was over. The sky was also getting brighter, and everyone took the opportunity to rest and recover. Gabriel's wife and children had also woken up, but of course, they did not remember anything. After that, a ceremony was held to restore the positive energy for the entire household, including Gabriel, even though he had awakened earlier. At the same time, a large ceremony was organized to stabilize the feng shui of the house after going through such terrifying supernatural events. Just when it seemed that the story had come to an end, it did not. The body of Mason was retrieved for the police to examine before being returned to the family, and during the funeral, many supernatural occurrences continued to happen. Not to mention the story of the old cemetery caretaker about the time he spent in the profession and his experience as a practitioner of spiritual sorcery. The following stories will be recounted in the next part, as the duration has already been quite long. First of all, thank you everyone for listening to Destroyer of Souls tell stories up to this point. As usual, if you enjoy the content of this video and want to make sure you don't miss out when Destroyer of Souls releases a new episode, please remember to like, share, and most importantly, hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to click the bell icon next to it to receive notifications and leave your comments below to increase interaction with the channel. Destroyer of Souls also hopes to receive real spiritual stories from everyone through the email address displayed on the screen, enjofeng@fenhuangmedia.com. Additionally, you can also send them via Destroyer of Souls' personal Facebook. All information and links can be found in the description and comments section. Please hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell so you don't miss the notifications about upcoming episodes of Destroyer of Souls. Thank you all once again. Goodbye, and see you in the next video.